dangerous tornado in progress, and you are watching that in the area just to the west of Rochelle, heading off toward the north and east. This one is showing very well-defined hook echo to that.
You want to say hi? Don't be shy. You want to say hi? Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly. Today we are going to be discussing a lesser known but really captivating event, and that is the 2015 Rochelle Fairdale tornado. Interestingly enough, if you are a fan of watching tornado videos, and I think most of you here are, you're probably familiar with the Rochelle Fairdale tornado video because it's a really infamous one. While we do have some really fascinating footage today that we're going to show, I do encourage you to check out some of the other chasers videos on this tornado and show them some love if you're still curious after this video's over, because frankly there's a lot of other chasers that were on the storm that have incredible footage that we're not even going to be able to get to. Last thing before we get started, I have added segments or chapters to the videos down below so you can freely kind of scroll through or skip. I do recognize that these videos are incredibly lengthy, so now you can kind of skip around if you'd like to. So with all that being said, let's get right into it. This is the 2015 Rochelle Fairdale tornado. Fairdale, Illinois is and has always been quite the small community. Originally known as Fielding, the community of Fairdale got its beginnings as early as 1875. While there was about 200 residents, a drugstore, and a church, Fairdale remained incredibly small and fairly stagnant for years. It wasn't even until 1924, almost 50 years later, that a four-year high school was built. But not even that lasted long. Like many other opportunities for growth, other surrounding towns like Kirkland were often the preferred area for businesses, and the high school would ultimately close in 1945. Fairdale now resides in the Franklin Township, which is comprised of Fairdale, Kirkland, and really just rural land. Together, the two communities make up a population of about 2,500 residents with some 950 housing units. Not much has ever really happened in Fairdale or in the surrounding communities, but I have a feeling that's exactly why the residents like it so much. Okay, so now that we understand the background of Fairdale and sort of where it's located and its history, let's take a look at some of y'all's favorite part, the meteorology for the event. On April 3rd, 2015, a low-pressure system is progressing through the Great Plains and moving towards the Great Lakes. And to note, this low-pressure system is both quite deep and fast-moving. Seeing that this system does have potential for a severe weather setup, on April 4th, 6 days before the outbreak, the SPC issues their convective outlooks and note the potential for a substantial severe weather outbreak possible next week. This would continue over the coming days. By April 5th and 6th, the SPC is only continuing to grow more confident that not only severe weather was possible, but likely, and now with the threat for tornadoes on the table. As the event draws closer each day, the anticipated threat is only continuing to increase with time. Now, in addition to the quickly progressing low pressure system, the more intricate elements are beginning to come together as well. One of those being an unusually warm and humid air mass for early April moving northward into the Midwest from the Gulf of Mexico. Not only that, forecasters are seeing that there's going to be strong southerly winds at the surface level with western winds aloft. And this kind of wind profile is exactly what allows for rotating updrafts, a critical element for tornado formation. Things are really starting to ramp up to be a dangerous and high ceiling event. Thursday, April 9th, 2015, the day of the Fairdale Rochelle tornado. All of the atmospheric elements are present. Chasers are getting ready to head out and set up for what appears to be a pretty big day ahead.
What's interesting, Carl, is we have seen from this morning fog with drizzle and 40-something degrees to temperatures in the 60s. We had clear skies, had a little bit of everything today, and now we're seeing at this stage, and that is the instability, quite a bit of it too.
By the early morning hours, the National Weather Service holds a partner conference call with emergency management in the region, which is a procedure for these higher ceiling days just to make sure that everybody is coordinated and on the same page should something happen. It's early afternoon and showers and thunderstorms are beginning to form west of the tornado watch area. The areas inside of the tornado watch are atmospherically primed so that once these rain and thunderstorms start to move into the area, it's only a matter of time before things start to happen. In the coming hours, these showers and storms will begin to get stronger, with supercell thunderstorms now beginning to form. One of those forming supercells is now entering the most primed area of concern inside the tornado watch. The Chicago National Weather Service office tags this emerging dominant supercell with a severe thunderstorm warning for 70-mile-per-hour winds and golf ball-sized hail. By 6:35 p.m., just a few minutes after the severe thunderstorm warning on this cell, the rotation is really causing a lot of concern. A tornado is not only likely with this cell, but imminent. And with that, they issue the first tornado warning for this cell.
I'll slide down then to the next storm down. That's down near the Franklin Grove area. You can obviously see how the storm is rotating with the inflow coming in. We'll take a look at the velocities on this one. It has such an intense velocity on it.
4 minutes later at 6:39 p.m., the increasing rotation and funnel have reached down far enough, and the infamous Rochelle Fairdale tornado touches down.
So this is a dangerous signature here. There may be a tornado in progress in there, and the radar is unable to depict that because it's seeing one side of the beam has one velocity, the other direction. We're seeing in the debris signature a huge area here of these blues that I talk about as the possibility of debris. So
the very first few minutes of the Fairdale tornado's life are in Lee County, where it's producing EF-0 damage in rural areas. But what's interesting about it in these early stages is just how quickly it's already traveling. It's already got a forward velocity of 60 miles per hour, which is really quick. to this point, the tornado has been only hitting rural areas and fields in Lee County, but that was about to change. After a few minutes of traveling through the rural areas in Lee County, the first building that the Rochelle tornado hits is the Crest Food Warehouse at EF-1 intensity. One of the things that stands out to me from early on with the Rochelle tornado was just how photogenic it was for seemingly its entire life. And not only the funnel itself, but the entire storm, the entire mezzo above it are just this really gorgeous structure through the entirety of its life from birth to death. Next, the twister is moving just north of the communities of Flagg and Ashton, Illinois. And to note, while the tornado did miss these communities, there were no schools, no churches, no residents really hit by this increasingly violent storm at this time. That was about to change.
Generally heading up toward the South Kings Road area and Highway 64, going to be heading up toward Linville there along Interstate 39. Linville, Flag Center, Linville.
Also, if you are just tuning in with us, we do have a confirmed tornado on the ground just north of Franklin. It's actually now located near Ashton or 9 miles west of Rochelle.
The tornado has just exited Lee County and moved into Ogle County, Illinois, and things are about to go downhill fast. This once relatively smaller tornado is now very quickly turning into a massive, almost wedge size already tornado with absolutely nothing impeding it. The National Weather Service quickly issues a statement confirming the information. Now a large and dangerous tornado is headed right towards northwestern Rochelle, Illinois.
Seeing also now north of Ashton, heading towards Rochelle. That's where our second tornado warning is at this point. There is a strong couplet to the west of Ashton, just north of I-8.
As if this holds together for the next 20 minutes.
However, thunderstorm. If we want to bring that up instead of the radar graphics, you can see this on your screen right now. This is a pretty massive tornado. So as you can see, this is in Ogle County. This is something just to kind of lend an image here to what we're showing you on radar.
In the northwestern portions of Rochelle, Illinois, lie the rural homes and farms of Scare Park. And it's here, just as the tornado reaches its very first area of multiple residents, that it reaches violent intensity. Some of the homes in the area would be more fortunate, only withstanding EF-3 intensity with several roofs receiving damage, but not everyone was so lucky. Just beyond Scare Park is a subdivision known as Deer Creek. It would be here, particularly on East Cool Court, where well-built homes were swept away.
Rochelle, you are up next to be seeing the possibility of a tornado in your area. 6:59, you've got less than 10 minutes to make your way to shelter. You need to seek shelter immediately and make your way to a basement. Again, a large and dangerous tornado. Large and extremely dangerous tornado was located near Hillcrest or just northwest of Rochelle, and it is moving northeast at 45 miles per hour.
We are really seeing a pretty good indication here of that storm on radar, that large and dangerous tornado. You can see right in here, that's where that rotation is. You can see how the storm is curling in on itself, and right in here.
In the pictures, you can really see just how badly destroyed and ground up the homes really were, as they were drug across the field with tiny pieces of the homes trailing behind the storm. And this was really the first instance out of a few of the Rochelle tornado where the EF-5 damage rating really comes into play, where it is really strongly argued. Again, that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, but it would be here in this neighborhood and subdivision where winds were estimated to be upwards of 200 miles per hour. After moving through Deer Creek and Scare Park, the tornado is now headed towards South Center Road and Highway 32. At this point, it's wedging out, and it is absolutely menacing to look at.
Right now, if we can make our way back to that, we do have video on that right now. You can see that on your screen. Again, if you are not in your basement, you need to get in your basement. This is near Pearl Street and Highway 72 right now. Multiple reports of a large wedge. This is an extremely dangerous tornado in DeKalb County right now. We have seen reports of damage in Ashton. Again, this is moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. This is a massive wedge that is making its way, again, right now near Pearl Street and Highway 72. If you are anywhere near a basement or safety shelter, that is where you need to be right now.
For a brief period, the twister once again moves over rural areas, staying north of towns and populous regions. And while, of course, it is a good thing that the twister is missing these areas of population, there were plenty of crops, farm buildings, farm equipment, farmers' homes that all took a lot of damage. Although it's not moving over populous regions, it's still causing damage that is really detrimental to families.
At pictures from different ones that viewers have sent in. Reminder, send it safely to us to news@wrex.com. Many of you have been sending it to our Facebook page as well. But the big thing, stay safe right now, everybody, and take care, because there's a lot to get to tonight. We're going to continue, Alex and Morgan. We are going to try to get those emergency authorities on the phone with us so we can get an update on what the response has been. But right now, I want to send it back to you guys because you guys are now going to continue to track the storms for us. Alex?
Spotter reporting damage there, Dr. Forbes, near Ashton.
Spotter reporting damage near Ashton. It's moved on right at this time. About 2 minutes ago, it's located about 5.5 miles west-southwest of Hillcrest. So that would mean probably now it's about 2 miles west of Hillcrest and moving up into the area that will go toward the Hillcrest and the Esmond area. So dangerous storm with a debris ball, with a tornado debris signature, well-defined rotation with that.
The twister is about to ramp up once again, and again, I just have to reiterate, it's massive at this point. It is almost half a mile in width, and when you look at the entire storm, it is absolutely terrifying. The tornado is making a beeline for Highway 64.
With continuing to have a debris signature. In fact, the debris field may be expanding, as if that we've had the possibility that it has caused a bit of damage, and some of that is being dispersed. We get down toward the base of that wall cloud. So I had mentioned earlier, I thought it might be a little bit obscured and a little bit of layer of rain, and that may be the case here, the combination of shadows from the cloud above it. But
as the storm approaches, hail begins to fall on those in the direct path. One of the few and really eerie signs of impending danger. Mel Jamie was working as a waitress at the Grubstakers restaurant on April 9th, and she remembers that day very vividly. One that started off with an eerie feeling as she got ready to go to work. Something just really felt off. And as someone who had always been afraid of storms, that feeling really stuck with Mel all day and left her with a heightened sense of fear. She remembers the customers that day keeping everyone updated on the weather, the tornado watches, and even with the tornado warnings before, but nobody expected that it was going to come right towards them. Mel remembers looking out the window and the tornado being right outside and just how massive it was. She was crying, but said that she at the same time couldn't move. Her boss comes over and grabs her by the arm and takes her along with the rest of the customers down to the cellar that the restaurant thankfully had. The chef, who was the last one in the cellar, says through the cracks of the cellar door, the last thing he could see was one of the doors of the restaurant being ripped off.
Bring in Dr. Greg once again, and Dr. Greg, that is certainly one of the worst that we've seen in a while.
Yeah, this is a massive cone or perhaps even wedge tornado. Wedge tornado is wider than it is tall, and I think this would characterize that. And just above that, a layer that is the wall cloud that is itself impressive, and then above that, the prevailing cloud base. So dangerous tornado there.
Just after moving over the Grubstakers restaurant, within the same intersection, a row of 5 homes would be the next target of the twister. Of those 5 homes, 2 of them were completely swept away. And this is another one of the points within the twister's life where upper echelon damage occurs, and once again where people really argue the EF-5 rating. Some of the damage here included one home with a concrete walkway that had been pulled several inches from the ground, well-anchored homes that were torn apart. There was ground scouring, and here at this intersection, a car would be tossed over 200 yards. Here at this point, in my opinion, is one of the parts where the most ominous footage is captured by storm chasers. The twister is about to move over Interstate 39, and not only is it about to cross the interstate, but from the footage you can tell that there's still a ton of cars on the road.
Now we're getting a much clearer picture, and folks, this is live. This is not tape. You were looking at a live tornado there near Rochelle, Illinois, and a very large wedge-shaped tornado now moving off to the northeast at about 40 miles per hour right there, and we can only hope that there aren't very many people in the way of this thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and we know that this is heading toward I-39, so you can, in fact, can see the interstate right there. So let's hope that the traffic, the southbound traffic there is still going. You see there a couple of tractor trailers coming southbound, so you hope at some point that the state police will be stopping the traffic. Otherwise, you could have some people that are driving right into this.
I don't know whether the people are still driving because they genuinely didn't see the storm or realize it was a tornado. That's kind of hard to imagine. Or if rather they felt like they could get ahead of the storm. Maybe they weren't really sure how far away it was and that they could drive past it. I'm not really sure, but I felt that there really should have been some sort of intervention in terms of blocking off the interstate. I don't know whether that happened or not, but to me, with the footage, it's pretty apparent that the storm crossed over and people were very close to the tornado, practically almost driving into it. Hi, Blaze.
This is at the rain-free and then lowered rain base type interface. We talk about the interface of a downdraft and the updraft, where these big wall clouds and these big wedge supercell tornadoes form, and this is about as classic a view of that as we get, Carl.
After moving over the interstate now, the twister is making a beeline for the small community of Fairdale. Fairdale, as we mentioned earlier, is a community so small that it's really only comprised of a few streets that's only residential areas. There are no businesses, there are no churches, schools, there's no town center. It's just a few streets of homes. That's it. And up until this point, considering how large and how destructive this tornado had the potential to be, it has really moved around major town centers. It has completely skipped areas of larger population, but with Fairdale, it was about to take a direct hit from one of the most intense parts of this storm.
Greg, when you have a storm that is this large, oftentimes within that larger wedge-shaped funnel, you're going to have what are called multiple vortices, or smaller tornadoes that rotate about each other and are often responsible for extreme violence because of the rapid change in the winds as they move around each other.
Yeah, Dr. Fujita back in 1971 proposed that those existed. And
Clem Schultz was a resident of Fairdale at the time, living in his home with his wife Geraldine, or known as Jerry, and their dog Missy. On April 9th, when the fateful twister began to approach their home. Clem and his wife knew that the tornado was approaching. In later interviews, Clem would actually discuss that because he didn't really think the tornado was headed right in their direction, he really thought it might move past them. But as the minutes continued to pass, it became more obvious that the twister wasn't going to move past them, but rather hit them head on. The twister overtakes the home of the Schultz and the entire community of Fairdale. In Fairdale alone, 70 homes would be damaged, 13 of which were considered destroyed. And when you look at a map of Fairdale, those 70 buildings that it hit was the entire community. Fairdale was truly swallowed by this storm. Many of the houses on the northwestern side of the area were in the upper end EF-3 intensity damage range, which means that oftentimes there was some sort of structural damage like wall collapsing or roofs being torn off, still very significant. However, a few of the homes within Fairdale took the brunt of the storm's intensity and were swept from their foundation and completely collapsed or just gone. The tornado is on its last leg and doing everything it can to unleash its final bit of strength. Another swath of damage would occur at Irene and McNeil Roads. At this intersection was the Everbolt farm, which was largely destroyed. Farm buildings were structurally compromised. And finally, after passing over one final field at 7:20 p.m. Central Time over Cherry Valley Road, the Rochelle Fairdale tornado finally dies off. The tornado has just lifted and the people of Rochelle and Fairdale are starting to come out of their homes and out of the rubble. Those who sheltered in the cellar of the Grubstakers restaurant, which took a direct hit, are trapped inside the cellar. Unbeknownst to the patrons of the restaurant and the staff, the Grubstakers restaurant was completely destroyed. The cars that were once in the parking lot, some of them were tossed, many of them were mangled or had debris in them. They were mud-caked, and all of what used to be the restaurant is completely scattered about and destroyed. Clem Schultz, like many of the residents of Fairdale, is also starting to come out of the rubble of what used to be his home. Moments after the storm has passed, emergency responders and storm chasers come across Fairdale and they happen upon Clem Schultz. In just a few minutes, his life has changed forever. While Clem and his dog, who were on the top floor of their home when the tornado passed, have miraculously survived the storm, Emergency responders quickly realize that Clem's wife Jerry is under the debris below him, and she has already passed away.
We're seeing now, I believe we're seeing some damage that this tornado has done, Carl.
All right, we want to go back out to Matt Sala, who's behind the camera right now. And Matt, tell us where you are right now, what town this is, and what you're seeing. Obviously, it looks like we've been hit pretty hard by this tornado in this town.
Yeah, this town looks like Fairdale. Yeah, there's a lot of damage here. Trees down everywhere. This looks like it was a really, really strong tornado. I'm not sure I can even get through the town at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, this is really bad.
So we're looking at, looks like we're looking at trees that have been sheared off around the middle, and a lot of structural damage, unfortunately, as well. We hate to see this kind of thing.
Yeah, unfortunately.
One of the silver linings of the Fairdale Rochelle tornado was that because there were so few large structures that were destroyed, it made the search and rescue process a little bit quicker. Not only was there an abundance of first responders coming out to help at, for example, the Grubstakers restaurant, but there was also an abundance of members of the community who weren't directly impacted, who very quickly came to help those in Fairdale and in these harder hit regions. And that really kind of speeds up a lot of the process, which is really just finding and accounting for people.
We're getting word that this is a restaurant named Grubstakers. That's the name of the restaurant on Illinois 64, as well as Illinois 251, on the corner of 64 and 251. Again, Grubstakers, the restaurant. Getting word that folks were trapped now in the basement, and those rescue efforts are underway. We'll try to get the latest on if there are any injuries and if everyone made it out safely.
Within just a few hours, the fire department was able to assess the situation at the Grubstakers restaurant and successfully get out everyone who was trapped in the cellar. Fortunately, thanks to the watchful eye of the patrons and thanks to the quick thinking and action of the staff, everyone who was in the Grubstakers restaurant made it out alive and well.
How many people were down there?
12, I believe. I think there was 12, so it was the cook and the owner and her son and the dishwasher and myself, and then 5 or 6 patrons. So a lot of praying, some crying, but a lot of reassurance, you know, that everything was going to be okay. So it was so fast, you know, from when I got down there to when, you know, the tornado came over. It just went by so fast.
Again, early morning, we're going to be there for you. And again, we'll shed first light on this as the situation unfolds before us. But my gosh, frightening situation. As it stands in Chicago, those guys, we aren't done as of yet. If you look at radar, you'll see that we still have a few telltale thunderstorms still gaining a little bit of strength farther back.
The rest of the night would be similar for everyone. Just trying to assess what's happened to them, the extent of the damage to their home, whether or not their friends and family are okay, and it's really what the next steps are. In total, the Rochelle-Fairdale tornado traveled 30.14 miles in 41 minutes, caused $19 million in damage, with maximum wind speeds estimated to be 200 miles per hour. The Rochelle tornado, as we mentioned previously, was part of a larger outbreak between April 8th through 10th of 2015, which consisted of 11 confirmed tornadoes in central and northern Iowa alone. And not only that, this entire system caused damage throughout a major swath of the U.S. In total, there were 2 fatalities and 22 injuries from the Rochelle-Fairdale tornado. The 2 fatalities were both in the Fairdale community, one being Jerry or Geraldine Schultz, who was Clem's wife, of course. She was 67 years old at the time, and the second fatality was Jerry's best friend, Jacqueline Closa, who was 69 years old at the time. Neighbors said that the 2 were so inseparable in their lives together that they decided to depart together. Now, I have to say, with the fatalities, I have to say I personally feel that given the width of this storm, the fact that it moved over multiple residential areas, and just the intensity of the storm. I am a little surprised that there weren't more fatalities. Of course, we're happy that there weren't, but seeing the footage of people driving over Interstate 39 at the time, not really knowing the outcome, I was personally really concerned that there was going to be fatalities or serious injury out of that, but I couldn't really find anything, so maybe that just means there weren't any, thankfully. All right, let's take a look at the damage and surveys. In the next couple days, the National Weather Service Chicago office and the local emergency management offices would coordinate to conduct storm surveys. Now, for the intensity of this storm, it was decided that both an aerial and ground survey would be conducted. And I do think that pretty early on in the survey process, it was obvious that they were looking at violent level destruction and an upper echelon rating, EF-4 to EF-5. So what did the survey find? What was in the survey? Let's take a brief look at the results. In the Deer Creek subdivision area on East Cool and East Fowler roads, we know that well-anchored homes were swept away. This was definitely one of the areas where the EF-5 rating was considered really heavily. The next area of potential EF-5 damage was considered on Highway 64, where the Grubstakers restaurant was, and several homes were severely damaged and in some cases swept away. This was the area where one of the cars was tossed over 200 yards and intense ground scouring was once again found. But ultimately, after the ground survey, the team ultimately decided that the Rochelle Fairdale tornado was an EF-4 rated tornado. Some people didn't like that. Some people, after looking at the imagery of the homes swept away in Deer Creek, felt that this storm deserved to have an EF-5 rating and that it was in some way cheated out of having an EF-5 rating. Honestly, the EF-5 rating debacle happens every single time there's an EF-4 rated tornado. If you ask me personally, it really doesn't matter, does it? At the end of the day, the damage for Fairdale and Rochelle would not have been any different had it been rated EF-5, and there wouldn't have been a difference in the way that people's lives were impacted.
There's still some debate, even to this day, between storm chasers as to whether it should have been categorized as an EF-5, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to the people that were impacted. It doesn't matter what the exact wind speed was. It had huge consequences for the people that were in the pathway.
Here's what I will say though, none of us were there in person to see the damage. I am not an engineer, and I certainly do not specialize, nor have I been formally trained in the intricacies of tornado wind damage. So it's not something I can speak on, and I think maybe we should consider that the experts are experts for a reason. Now, something I do want to say though is that if you want to learn about the EF scale or damage ratings from someone who is trained and does know what they're talking about, you can go check out Ethan Moriarty's video on the EF scale that he's done. It's a really impressive video, and his channel generally is just a really cool insight into the mechanics of a lot of these things from an engineer's perspective. I'm not inclined in anything relating to engineering, so I always really respect people who can give a valid opinion and people who do know what they're talking about. So I do recommend you go check out his channel. I'll have it like in the cards somewhere up here and linked below in the description if you want to check it out there. So let's take a look at the cleanup and recovery process of the Rochelle tornado in the subsequent weeks, months, and years. Just a few days after the Rochelle Fairdale tornado, Governor Bruce Rauner declared DeKalb and Ogle counties the hardest hit counties as disaster areas. In the coming week or so, locals in the surrounding communities are beginning to donate equipment and resources to help clean up and provide for those who have lost their homes, be it food or water or shelter. Individuals around the state even donated their own money and resources to help provide supplies that the victims needed. Once again, these are all individuals, really volunteers, people who are just willing to give the shirt off their back or money to their neighbor or maybe someone they don't even know. But I want you to note that all of the assistance that I have just mentioned up until this point has been from individuals or individuals who have coordinated efforts through their own business or organization. None of the help that I've mentioned thus far has come from the state or has come from the government. And you might be saying, well, Carly, I thought that the government declared those counties disaster areas, so doesn't that naturally free up state and government funding? And to that I say, normally, yes, it does. But not this time. The $19 million in damage from the Fairdale Rochelle tornado simply did not meet the threshold for damage to receive any federal or state aid. I do understand that there are requirements for aid in most instances, but to me, when I hear $19 million in damage, dozens of homes flattened, that seems like not a small event, right? It was an EF-4 tornado. So when I heard that, I tried to be understanding at first, but they really started to lose me at a point in terms of being understanding, to the point now where I've kind of read enough information where I feel like it was really pathetic that not only did it not meet the threshold to help these people, but the promise of doing anything that they could to help clearly wasn't really upheld. There are so many different things they could have done to get the people the help that they really promised them. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it now. So what did happen to the recovery process? Without that state and government funding, what does the recovery process look like for such a small community? 1 month after the Fairdale Rochelle tornado, not much had changed. Apart from the horrific lack of funding or any kind of aid from the government or state, one of the other major problems with the rebuilding process in Fairdale specifically was that its structures were quite old enough that everything needed to be changed. For example, the old sewage system was running off into the creek, the damaged buildings were not up to code, so there were a lot of things that had to structurally change sort of from the bottom up in order for any new construction to really take place. So what happened is people were really in a sort of pickle where they weren't even able to rebuild their homes. It was still sort of the same really sad scene of looking like their home had just been blown away by a tornado yesterday. It's particularly sad to think about what the people really had to go through. They wanted to move on and they weren't able to move on. So in the coming months, the only funding that was available for the people in Rochelle and Fairdale was from funding that was individually raised. The majority of that came from a nonprofit that was put together, again, by the locals, called the DeKalb County Long-Term Recovery Corporation, which donated a total of $1.4 million, which was great, and I'm really glad that somebody took charge of disaster relief like this. But at the same time, $1.4 million compared to the $19 million done, I'm not sure how much insurance covered of the rest of that, you know, or just supplies that people needed, like food and shelter and clothes and temporary housing. Where did the money for all that come from? I assume it came from the $1.4 million. So between the 6-month and 1 year mark after the tornado, some people did eventually rebuild. And this largely consisted of those who were homeowners who had insurance and the ability to rebuild. But again, even still at this point, 6 months to 1 year later, a lot of people still didn't have the ability to rebuild or to repair or to just get rid of the house and sell the land off. With that, it was also really hard for people to mentally move on. Not only are they having to overcome the fact that they may or may not be able to rebuild their home, but now they're having to kind of walk outside every day and have that scenery. I imagine it was incredibly mentally difficult to just move past the tornado when every day you're seeing the remains of the tornado across the street. Now, in the 1 to 5 years after the tornado, things did eventually start to get better. Some 50 homes have since been rebuilt, with just over 25 that have been repaired. So there were instances of people who were able to successfully recover, and some better than they had been before. And I do want to highlight the fact that despite the fact that the state and the government was really lacking in this instance, there was a really strong sense of community. Everyone in Rochelle and in Fairdale really did their very best to overcome these really difficult obstacles. The people who went through the event and decided to stay in Fairdale will often say that they stuck together and now they are closer because of it. So in a way, I really do admire the folks in Fairdale and the Rochelle areas, and despite the fact that they had so much to overcome, they really overcame it together, even as a really tiny community. So what about Fairdale and Rochelle now? It's been several years since the event has happened, so how are the small communities doing now? Fairdale and areas around Rochelle do still hold memorials on the anniversaries of the event. There is a memorial bench to the 2 women who lost their lives, the best friends. Mel, who was one of the waitresses in the restaurant that was blown away, recalls what a humbling experience it was, how neighbors and complete strangers came to aid in their darkest times. I know a lot of you are going to be wondering about Clem Schultz. He did eventually return to Fairdale with his dog, who survived the storm. He would end up meeting with his former neighbor Joe to watch the video and kind of reminisce on the event. But ultimately, Clem decided to move away. Understandably so, that was just probably too much. So Clem decided to move closer to his children, where I believe he still resides to this day. In the several years since the event, Clem has done several interviews. He has really become an advocate for tornado safety, and he's a pretty big proponent on wanting people to see the video and hear his story, just to educate others and be open about how dangerous it is to film a tornado. Honestly, it was just really tragic how Clem, being the one who was upstairs and filming the tornado, survived while his wife was arguably in the safer area, and she was the one who ended up losing her life. And honestly, sometimes there's just no logical explanation to how people survive these freak events the way they do. Clem Schultz says his mantra to get over the sadness every day, especially on days near the anniversary, is to find a bit of humor in your everyday life. If you can't find something humorous in any situation, he says, you ought to find something to laugh about, because if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. Okay, so that is the story of the Rochelle Fairdale tornado. I don't know how to feel about this one. This one was kind of heavier than I expected in the end, and I think that's because I ended up being really disappointed at the lack of help for those in Fairdale. I think it just left me a little bit more disappointed than usual. They did recover, but I mean, gosh, how difficult it must have been and how painful it must have been for all of them. Yeah, if you enjoyed the video, do give it a like below for me. It helps promote me in the algorithm and it lets me know that you like it. Imagine that. I also do have a Twitter I will put up here somewhere. And anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching and for being here with me. I really, truly appreciate it. That's all I have for you. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Such a handsome boy. Let's look at the meteorology. Down quick. What am I talking about? Scrap the whole thing. Holy scrap. After moving over to